Shabbat Shalom, everyone. It's good to be with you on the first Shabbat of 2025. I know. Now that we've been living in our house for over a year and a half, I think we finally decided to start making it feel more like a home. But the problem is that neither my wife or really I have a ton of styling or home decorating expertise. If you want me to decorate your room, I can throw up some rock and roll posters or put some Batman action figures around, but that's all I can really do, because when it comes to curtain rods and ottomans, I'm really clueless. So in response to this, my wife attempted to style our living room, and she purchased these things. And I'm so bad at home decor, I don't even know what they're called. Maybe you know. They're square, they kind of look like a footrest, but they're covered in fabric, and they're just big enough for a kid about 6 years old to sit on. I'm told that once upon a time, these squared fabric things used to have these little wooden feet on the bottom of them to make them look like actual furniture, but my children immediately broke those off, and now they use these square fabric things as race cars all over our house. You can bend over and push it and it slides on the floor. This is great fun if you're 6. If I'm being honest, I actually hate when my kids slide around on these things, because when they broke off the feet on this fabric muscle car, I think a nail or a screw must still have been exposed on the bottom. And if done correctly, this race car can scratch my beautiful wooden floor when you race around on it. Now, when you're 6 years old, this doesn't mean much to you. You don't understand why adults would care about a scratch floor. Why would anyone care about a scratch floor when there are games to be played and SpongeBob on TV to be watched? But when you've worked all your life to get to a spot where you have the means to have a nice floor, the last thing you want is it to be scratched by a 6-year-old fabric race car. Well, the other day, I happened to be getting ready for work when out of the corner of my eye, I see the 6-year-old coming through our living room, driving one of these square fabric mobiles, and following behind him, underneath on my nice wooden floor, was a huge scratch. It was enormous. It was about the size of the Grand Canyon, I think. And when I saw it, I freaked out. I was not happy. So I gave my 6-year-old a very long lecture, which in retrospect did not make sense to a 6-year-old, because it was about responsibility and finance. And I think I mentioned the economy at some point. It was really awful, and thinking back on it, I don't know if I even understood it myself. As a side note, Genevieve's mom and stepdad were staying with us at this time, and I really love them. And so I told her stepdad about the scratch, and he said, "Oh, Jonathan, you need to get Old English wood stain," is what he told me. I didn't know what that was, but he assured me that it would make the scratch look better. Okay, so we get this stuff. God bless him. He put it on the floor, rubbed it into the scratch, and made it look way worse. Might as well have painted a huge sign on the floor that says, "Come visit the Mariana Trench of scratches here in the Hodson living room." Anyway, later on in the week, I was here at shul. I was actually in our minyan here in the morning, and while Mike was davening, I got a call on my cell phone from somebody here in the congregation who has a loved one that's in the hospital. And so I was standing here in the chapel. I was wearing my talit, I was wearing tefillin, and my phone buzzed, and I saw the call come in, and I recognized the number. And so I answer it, and I start walking to my office, because I know the person on the other end is about to start giving me details. And if you're like me, you've got to write details down when you get them. Otherwise, they go into the abyss in here. And so I knew she was going to give me the hospital name and the room number and the Hebrew name, all of this stuff. So I know I need that info. I start walking to my office while I'm on the phone with her, and I'm trying to get to a pen and paper very quickly to write this stuff down. And I get to the office suites at the end of the hall here, but the lights are still all off because it's morning. So I enter the office door and I try to turn on the light, but because it's dark, I can't see much. And my tefillin on my left arm snags the door frame as I walk by. Long story short, I scratch my beautiful tefillin. And when I saw the scratch on my tefillin, I was really upset with myself, so I gave myself a lecture. It was about responsibility and finance, and I think I mentioned the economy at some point. It was really long, really awful. And friends, I've been thinking about these scratches, the one on my floor and the one on my tefillin. I've been thinking about them all week. And I think of them more like scars. Because while in reality I know that they are only just scrapes in the material, but each one of those scratches tells a story of a mistake. In our Torah reading for this Shabbat, Parshat Vayigash, we're at the tail end of the Joseph story, and we get this scene in which Joseph reveals his scars to his brothers. But these aren't physical scars. No, these are the scars left on his heart, on his pride, and on his neshama, on his soul. These are the scars left on him from when his brothers betrayed him and framed him and sold him. I think chapter 45 of Bereshit, of Genesis, might be one of the most emotionally charged chapters in all of the Torah. We're told that Joseph orders all of his servants out of his room in the palace. So really, there are only two parties left in this very awkward space, just Joseph and his brothers. His brothers don't know that he's Joseph. They think he's Egyptian royalty. He orders everyone out. It's just them and himself. And then the Torah tells us that he could, quote, no longer contain his emotions. And the text tells us that Joseph begins to weep and to wail. And in fact, the Torah says he wept so loudly that his servants who had been kicked out of the room, they can still hear him wailing and crying in other parts of the palace. It's so loud, it's so awful, they can hear it. They can probably feel it. The scar that runs through Joseph's heart has not completely healed. And while Joseph is the second most powerful man in the entire country, he could have anything in ancient Egypt that he wants. He still does not have the closure he needs from his family. Heck, Joseph doesn't even have the information he needs. The first thing he asks his brothers after he reveals himself to them, quote, is my father still alive? He doesn't even know. He has no clue if Jacob is alive or if he's passed away yet. And his brothers are so shocked and confused and scared by Joseph's revelation that the Torah says they can't even respond to him when he asks the question. They just stand there, mouths open, at a complete loss for words. And if the story ended there, that would be one thing, but it doesn't end here, because the next verse, I think, is even more powerful. Joseph tells them, quote, don't be distressed or angry with yourselves for selling me here, because God sent me here ahead of you to preserve life. To preserve life. And while Joseph is obviously talking about the famine that he prevented in Egypt, I think what the Torah is really advocating It's that the scars that his brothers gave him, that is what has preserved his life and allowed him to become the person that he is standing before them. You see, dear friends, it's our life experiences. It's our tragedies and our triumphs. It's our scars that mold us into the people that we are. Joseph had every right to be bitter and angry and upset and betrayed by what his family did to him. Joseph could have curled up in a ball and rotted away in Pharaoh's dungeon. He could have completely given up, but rather he chose to rise to the occasion and become the man that God wanted him to become. But even then, as powerful as he became, Joseph's scars served as a reminder to him that he was really just a kid brother from a big family in Canaan. And those same scars enabled him to see God's bigger picture and forgive his family for their betrayal. This morning, as we begin our first Shabbat of 2025, I'll ask you to think about your own personal scars that you carry. Maybe these were inflicted by family or friends years ago, or maybe they were given to you recently by someone you trusted. So my question is, how have these scars shaped you? What kind of person have they forced you to become? But most importantly, have your scars made you bitter, or have they allowed you to see the bigger picture? I'm not suggesting that the latter is easy, far from it, but with God's help, I think anything is possible. After all, Joseph was in the depths of an Egyptian dungeon, and he became royalty. I'll conclude this morning by saying that we all carry scars, but it's how we allow them to heal that define us. And lastly, if you hear nothing else from me this morning, hear this. If you happen to be an expert on wooden floor repair or tefillin repair, please see me after services to help me heal my scars. Shabbat Shalom.